Okay, welcome to the podcast, and please explain this for me. Labor's more popular than National right now. How? What's it done? And is hiding in plain sight the best approach from Labor? Because the more you see of them and their policies and their mates, the public might just be turned off. David Farrar, the man behind the poll and the sharpest political tool in the kit, is with us to explain what's going on. Welcome to the program.
Are we paying these people to front up, or are we paying them to fly to Wellington to eat their lunch? Should you really lose your career for refusing to take part in a 90-minute lesson about Māori culture? This government doesn't actually have any idea how to get economic growth. Show us what you made of, Prime Minister.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.
Okay, good to have you along, everybody. You're with the Editor-in-Chief. I'm Duncan Garner. Welcome, and please subscribe. Always useful if you can subscribe. Keeps us around a little bit longer. Labor has not done a thing except turn up to Parliament to eat its lunch, oppose National and support the Greens and Te Pāti Māori. We know the battle lines are drawn on one side, Labour, Greens and Te Pāti Māori. The other side, of course, is National, New Zealand First and ACT. And on the latest Taxpayers Courier poll, National's block is just ahead of Labour's by 2 votes, 2 seats in it. The economy, the sagging economy, is hurting Luxon, hurting National. No one's convinced he has the right ideas to get us going again, and of course you blame the government. But Labour has just quietly nudged ahead of National as the biggest party. Just quite incredible, really, isn't it? The less Hipkins is seen and heard, the more popular he becomes. National is fighting for a second term. You'd think, given Labour's record, it would be coasting, but no, it's not. And it's hard not to point the finger at Luxon, really. Uninspiring, making it up, out of touch, and overseeing an economy that's in a bit of trouble. Also, of course, there's the pay-cary moves as well during the budget or before the budget, which would have hurt his vote in some way. David Farrar is with us shortly. Let's go.
It's the Slam Dunk.
So we've seen 2 polls over the past few days. The Federated Farmers initiated poll, which saw National hit 54%, ACT 19, New Zealand First 8. But the combined opposition, Labour, Greens and Te Pāti Māori, got 6%. It was woefully low. But it was only what farmers thought. Voters in a second, more broader and nationwide Courier poll, funded by the Taxpayers Union, throws up an entirely more realistic picture. And National is just ahead of the Labour-led bloc, but it's tight, just 2 seats in it. So National needs to do some soul-searching and work out why people are still entertaining Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Māori. Why isn't National demolishing these guys? Have we got short memories, or has the economic collapse really started to bite now? And we look at Luxon and wonder, are you just making this up? Do you have any idea what you're doing? Do you have an idea how to put us on the right track? Maybe all we see is National cutting everything, and we're worried about that as well. And people are yet to get spooked by linking Labour to the Mad Hatter Greens and into the sort of anti-Pākehā Te Pāti Māori party, of course. There's also the pay-cary stuff as well, which was huge and took, well, you know, it was potentially a massive vote loser. Maybe National's got away with a bit of murder there. Anyway, it's only a matter of time, isn't it, before National starts to link Te Pāti Māori and the Labour Party. That will come. But as a result, Labour has nudged past National at 34.8. National's down to 33.5. But it's a lacklustre Luxon and a struggling economy that keeps Hipkins in the race, surely. Voters were largely unmoved by the budget. They remain a bit unconvinced about Luxon, who still comes across awkward and lacks authenticity. And saying that, what's Labour done to deserve almost 35%? It's kept its head down. It's done nothing. The more it hides Hipkins, the better it does, but that can't last forever. Mention capital gains taxes, mention inheritance taxes, mention the Greens, watch voters walk away from Labour, you'd think. But it's hard to believe Labour's head of National. And maybe voters know that they can have a mid-term sort of protest in one of these polls and it means nothing. It's not like changing the government, if you know what I mean. It's meaningless, really. On the second Courier poll, National would still have the numbers on the centre-right to govern, but there are just 2 seats in it. Voters are perhaps yet to associate Te Pāti Māori's toxic agenda with a Labour-led government. But Labour won't govern without the Māori Party. Now keep saying that, National. That's what you need to do. Keep saying, linking the Te Pāti Māori to a Labour government. But when the time comes, National ACT and New Zealand First will run a fierce scaremongering campaign, I would have thought, designed to frighten voters on this. And Labour's bed pals, the volatile Te Pāti Māori, will be the target and Labour stands to lose. I know Labour's worried about this behind the scenes big time. I think Luxon shouldn't wait. He should grow some nuts and step up and start to call it like it really is. Tell people bluntly what the options are. Remind Kiwis what it is that Te Pāti Māori want and what they think of Pākehās in their own land. If Te Pāti Māori and the Greens make it to government under a Labour-led coalition, because if Labour's governing, they'll be there, expect some of their more radical ideas to be implemented. I mean, the Greens want $88 billion worth of more taxes. Where's that coming from? And then there's the Māori agenda as well, unfinished business perhaps from the previous Ardern government. If you thought Jacinda was dangerous, wait till Te Pāti Māori get going. MP Takata Ferris wants the outspoken Waitangi Tribunal to have its reports binding on the government. It would render ministers powerless, pointless. Unelected activists would have binding reports going to the government. They would have to introduce it. These sorts of nutty ideas are yet to flow to the public, but rest assured, closer to the election, National will have to launch some sort of campaign to highlight what the radical left really want. Hipkins needs to give himself some wriggle room and distance Labour a bit. Take a principled position on Te Pāti Māori's unacceptable attacks on Pākehā New Zealanders, Chris, and its arrogant swagger and dismissal of the rules of Parliament. Hipkins would look like he's got a bit of a spine then and some principle. Sadly, he's too scared to push them away. And that will come into sharp focus shortly, won't it? But overall, voters are uninspired by the flat economy and the continual cuts and the tightening of the belt. And with more jobs being lost, people feel vulnerable. Governments are always blamed for that sort of thing. And Luxon's no different. He's no different to that. He's copying it. This poll should worry National, though. You know, with the power of incumbency and with a supposed recovering economy slowly ticking over, that you'd think that National would be doing better, and Labour's woeful time in office still in our memories. Why can't National in a simple head-to-head poll get ahead of Labour? Have we got short memories? Do you remember just a short 18 months ago? This is when a popular and good leader can keep his or her party's fortunes ahead of the race and afloat, but Luxon can't do that. This country's voters are suspicious of Luxon, I think, and at times he lacks authenticity, tries too hard. It's kind of embarrassing. Also, Kiwis continue to ditch us for Australia, and if ever there was a daily poll of dissatisfied New Zealanders, then 190 are voting with their feet each day. That's how many leave for Australia. National certainly have struggled to articulate what it's aiming to do and when the growth will come, when we'll turn the corner. It's a long corner, isn't it? We're still on it. And Luxon's suffering for that. He's suffered in the face of two strong and visible decisive coalition partners as well. He's got Seymour and Peters there, and they know what they're doing. They seem to. And if anything, this is a poll. This poll is a reminder to National: never say never. Anything can happen, and you have to earn the right to govern every day. It's clear that Luxon is going to have to roll up his sleeves and fight because the mad left is knocking on the door. Hard to believe, isn't it? But never underestimate MMP's ability to make it hard for National. And don't underestimate how many voters switched off Luxon months ago, and they haven't returned. It's clear they're not returning. And they don't really like him. They don't warm to him, and he doesn't have the empathy that past leaders like Ardern, I suppose, and Key have had. So he's in a fight for national survival.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.
Right, and joining us now is David Farrar, the man behind the poll, and let's find out what's the thinking behind the poll, what does he make of it, and some of the stuff that we haven't yet talked about, some of the sort of minor details in the poll. David, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you here. The poll, the Taxpayer Union poll this week, Courier Taxpayer Union poll. I can't believe it. What's Labor done to be ahead of National?
Well, I think it's more what National has done, which is, you know, the budget had the pay equity announcement 2 weeks before the budget, and the PSA, all the unions up in arms. And actually, when you look at like that, to only lose 1% when people have said, yo, this is the biggest attack on women in our lifetime, etc., I think shows that they got off maybe even a bit lightly. So I don't think it's a story that Labor's doing amazingly. I think it's that, look, this was a budget which didn't have a lot of people celebrating because there's no money.
No, that's right. There's also this economic downturn drags on and continues, and National doesn't really get up in the morning and have much good news to spread. I suppose that's dragging people down as well. I suppose unemployment's gone up as well, David. In the last 6 months. So National's, I suppose, clinging on to that 30-odd percent it's got, but it will need to do better, although its coalition partners are doing quite well.
It does need to do better because even though they would still form government on this poll, they would have no list MPs, which would be a disaster for them. They definitely need to be in the high 30s, not the low to mid 30s. No doubt about that. And look, these economic downwinds, it's not just unemployment, but there was a presentation I heard last night about what the gas shortage is going to mean. And basically, spot power prices are massively up. And at the moment, it's industry paying it. But in time, they're going to hit residential power prices. So, in 6 months' time, we're going to have power prices going up, inflation going up. That's part of inflation, unemployment up, and who knows what Trump will do to the world economy. So it's a pretty tough environment.
It is a tough environment, and people do blame the government. I mean, government gets blamed for economic problems. Government gets blamed for job losses. Government gets blamed for higher energy prices. That's just the nature of the beast, right?
Yeah, but does this mean a change of government? No, because there's two things. First of all, you have to think things aren't great. I want to change, and at the moment, the country's pretty 50-50 on that. But then you have to say, I think the change would be better. And there's been around 60 polls since the election, Duncan, and not a single poll has shown Labour and Greens could govern by themselves. They need Te Pāhi Māori. And if I'm a campaign strategist for the government, I would be saying, well, get those viral videos going from YouTube and just get out to New Zealanders. Do you really think these guys can stop being angry, stop doing viral videos, and actually govern the country?
I reckon Luxon and co need to start talking about this now. As much as they need to talk about the economy and themselves, they need to point over here and say, look, it'll be a three-headed hybrid monster, and those guys on the end there would be dictating. They want the Waitangi Tribunal reports to be binding, therefore the executive doesn't make the law anymore, it goes through the back door. They need to start to scare people with the truth about the Māori Party, because they're a different Māori Party than Nationals ever run into before.
Oh, vastly, vastly different to the party of the past. And I agree. I mean, it shouldn't be the Prime Minister or the party leaders, but the parties with senior MPs, with campaign spokespeople, need to be getting out there and saying, look, this is what the alternative is going to be.
Yeah.
And the thing is, that will help Te Pāhi Māori, though. The more they're in the news, the better it is for them. But Labour's worried about this because, well, the swinging centrist voter, they might quite like Chris Hipkins, but they're going to think, oh, but I just don't think that they can govern with these guys to the left of them.
How? I mean, I believe they should distance themselves from them, to be honest, because I think they're toxic. They are destructive. They are racist. They're aggressive. I know they can't, but I know. This is their dilemma. But the problem is, they're just a toxic mess. I mean, Middle New Zealand can't stand them.
Well, here's something from my poll yesterday that didn't get much publicity. We asked about most of the party leaders, right? And one of the things we do is break that down by what do supporters of each party think. And two interesting things. First is national voters now love Winston.
Yeah.
You go back like me, Duncan, to 20 years of hating Winston. National voters now really like Winston. But here's the thing. Te Pāhi Māori co-leaders, they're not just unpopular with National Act and New Zealand First voters. Labour voters do not like them. The activists might, but average Labour voter does not like them, and that is a real problem. On the centre-right, National voters like Winston. They quite like David Seymour. The thought of them being in coalition again doesn't scare off National voters, but the Te Pāhi Māori co-leaders are not attractive at the moment to Labour voters. And
also to general Māori voters. I mean, not all Māori vote for Te Pāti Māori, not all Māori are activists, and they're not all hotheads. And Māori vote across the board. And I think increasingly, certainly I'm getting lots of email traffic and people coming up to me and everything from Māori people saying, I don't like what's going on with Te Pāti Māori. So it's not a generic vote at all, is it?
No, and one of the things I've just started doing in my poll is we normally ask an ethnicity question.
Oh, yeah.
And to be fair, of those who identify primarily as Māori, Te Pāhi Māori does quite well, not as well as Labour, but we're now also just asking the more general, are you of Māori descent? So that's anyone who's Whakapapa Māori,
yep.
That's around 20% of the country. And we've only got 1 month data, but what we're seeing so far is actually it's very different when you include everyone of Māori descent. There it's quite different voting patterns, and Te Pāhi Māori has actually got less support than National amongst people of Māori descent. Now, that does one poll, 150 people, so you can't put too much on that, but yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if you look at Labour and you look at Hipkins does well when he's never in the public eye, to be honest. I mean, Hipkins has had and probably quite a successful low key strategy in the past 18 months, and it's kind of worked for him. He seems to be safe in his leadership, no one sponsored, but he doesn't overplay his hand, I don't think.
It's the worst thing opposition leaders do is be too aggressive. when Phil Goff went after
Oh, yeah.
Richard Worth over that
Yes.
allegations, I saw the polling every week, and Goff's numbers just kept dropping.
Yeah.
So no, Hipkins, he's doing pretty well. He's got mildly favourability, but he needs to come out and say, what does Labor look like and how are we different to our two coalition partners?
Well, that's when you start talking about their tax review, their review of farming policies. Now, Labor's not talking about any of this stuff now, because the more they probably talk about capital gains tax and the more they talk about maybe the Greens' inheritance tax, that's when you start to see the left start to tank, because people don't want to hear about taxes.
Exactly, and you've got Labor saying, look, we might do an extra $1 billion or so of tax, and maybe that doesn't scare people too much, but the Greens want $88 billion of more tax.
Yeah.
And you look at that and think, well, what's the compromise going to be? 10 billion? 20 billion?
Yeah. And then you've got the Māori Party's wishes as well, which who knows what their mad head of stuff is. I wonder, did Chloe Swarbrick do badly in any of the... How did the Greens pull up there? I think they held their vote, didn't they? I thought Swarbrick's had a dreadful period after they announced the Green budget. I thought her grasp of her numbers and her policy was awful.
The Greens have the best brand of any party. You can have 5 scandals in a row, from shoplifting to labour exploitation to bullying to anger management issues, but they've got locked in around 7 or 8% of New Zealanders who just hear the word green and think of the environment and vote for them. When they do really well, they can get up to 15%. But even when they're not doing well, they still have 8-9% locked in or so, because people just think green, even though it's a long time. When did they last talk about the environment rather than Gaza?
Well, I don't know if they... Maybe Rod Donald? But it does seem like a long time ago.
Sam Shaw talked about the environment a bit.
Well, that's why, and then he was out in his ear, wasn't he? And then they got rid of him.
He was.
Don't you dare talk about the environment. I wonder what about Christopher Luxon's, some of his numbers and some of his vitals, if you like. I wonder if, people initially didn't see him as, they were a bit suspicious of him. They wondered if they could trust him. They wondered what did he really want to do? What did he really want to achieve? I think the best thing about Chris Luxon is that he's actually held this government together, and he seems to compromise well, and he seems to be able to manage the different warring factions in there, because if you think about having Winston and David under the same roof, could have been a nightmare, and it hasn't been.
Well, last election, Seymour was campaigning on "You must stop Winston."
Yes.
That was very much his campaign. Look, Luxon's got slightly negative favourability, and you'd rather have slightly positive than slightly negative. But you look at incumbents around the world. Anthony Albanese won a massive landslide. He actually went in with negative favourability. Keir Starmer, 1 year in office, should be on his honeymoon. He's at minus 30, 35%, etc. So, it's not as high as you would like it, and you have to be a bit careful, because Chippy or Hipkins does have mildly favourable, but we're not talking a big difference. It's like one's at +5, one's at -5. In the UK, Starmer's at minus 35.
Wow. I just wonder, though, the mess that we've got ourselves into around the economy in the last few years, lots of people blame Labor, look at Labor and say, don't give them another chance for a long time. And I just wonder that there can't be much favourable about Labor on the economy right now. But they've managed to somehow cling on, and they're not far off changing the government. If you look at the two blocks, they're only a couple of seats away on your poll. So, but for all the negative stuff around Labor, they've actually clung on pretty well, haven't they?
Well, people forget, look, on the economy, National's still seen by 20% or so as the better economic manager. On inflation, though, it's only 5%, and I think that's partly because people still are finding times tough, and National's now the government.
Yeah.
And on health, they're around 5 or 6% behind. And the health system was a disaster when inherited, but it's still not very good. So people... this is what government's about. You have a year and a half where people blame the other lot, but memories fade and people start to blame the incumbent. So the government needs to actually deliver and get those ED waiting times down, surgical waiting lists down.
I just look at Luxon. I think he's no John Key. He doesn't have that extra spring in his step, or the extra 2 or 3% of favourability. You know, Key polled very strongly for a very long time, and Luxon's never had that strength. He's never had that charm and warmth that Key had in the polls, especially.
Yeah, Key's an unfortunate comparison, I think, for both Key and Ardern were global superstars as leaders in quite different ways, but they're once-in-a-generation types, and we had two of them almost in a row. And when you look back to, you know, that Jim Bolger, you know, he was 3% preferred PM when he won in 1990, etc. So I think we got a bit spoiled because Key had, and look, you knew him pretty well too, he had this sense of humour, this way he could just speak to people when they didn't think he was speaking at them, he was speaking with them, etc. Which just people thought he's a good bloke. He's not just a politician.
But even if you look at Clark, though, I mean, people may not have liked her, but they certainly respected her. You know, there was certainly a level of respect for Helen Clark. I don't think Luxon has that level of likeability or respect from the New Zealand public, if you look at those numbers.
Yeah, look, Clark was exceptionally dominant, but people forget Luxon's a second-term MP.
Yeah, I know.
Most second-term MPs are hoping they'll get to chair a select committee, and he's the Prime Minister. Clark came in, was it 81? And she became Prime Minister after 18 years. You know, by then you're tough, you're hardened, you know all the tricks. You've got Heather Simpson there to kill any dissent and scare people. So I think that is part of the difference there, is that Luxon, I don't mean when I say he's learning on the job, because as you say, he's worked out how to work with Winston Seymour, he's focused the ministers on delivery, but some of that stuff about just being a bit more relaxed and natural at press conferences, etc., not resorting to the sound bites your press sec's written for you, that hasn't quite got through.
Yeah, it sort of lacks that, I don't know if the word's authenticity, but it's that sort of that more colloquial or relaxed, calm, assured. You know, when you're really assured of yourself in those jobs, you can actually relax into them, and I just don't think he's there yet. And I suppose that shows in the polls with those numbers. It's just that, you know, with the numbers that you have.
He's authentic in person. When people meet him, he's funny, likeable, great to talk to, very interesting. But this is media. You know, you have to be able to project that through either social media or mass media. Yeah,
I just think that, you know, if there was an election held today, would people really tick that Labour box? I just wonder if it's so you can have this security blanket where you can vote in any of your polls that you present people, but that doesn't actually mean anything because there's no change of government on the on the line. There's nothing on the line, so people can have a bit of a mid-year protest and it doesn't mean anything.
No, look, I think you're right. What the polls tell us at the moment is it's very close. People aren't entirely happy that, you know, things are still tight and the election's up for grabs, but you can't take today's poll and say that's how people will vote in 15 months' time. There's campaigns to be had, there's to see how the economy goes, but there's also what will the policies be, how many more billions of taxes are going to be promised, because this pay equity stuff, Duncan, while it's hurt the government a bit, Labour's boxed themselves in.
Yeah.
They now have to find $15 billion in their alternative budget to fund it. And that's $15 billion you won't have for more doctors, more nurses, more teachers, more operations, etc. So they either have to backtrack on that, or they're going to have to find $15 billion of extra taxes just to fund that one promise.
Well, just take pick up the Greens policy, tax policy, and then you found it almost. This is another show me the money moment, isn't it? Show me the money. Where is it?
It will be. There's going to be huge focus, I think, on that credibility of alternative budgets.
Totally.
Coming here. Because, to be honest, the government's numbers are right on the line. They're saying, like, if we manage to do everything really well, we'll just have a $22 surplus in 4 years' time.
I know.
Yeah, so even their numbers are right at the margin. And unless you come out and say, we're giving up on ever getting back into surplus, which I don't think will be very popular, it is going to be very tough to pop through an alternative.
Yeah, and the surplus is so small, so wafer thin that it's so easily a deficit. It doesn't take much for it to be a deficit,
The frigate knocking out our internet for half a day probably would knock us into deficit.
Yeah, that's right. Or a rainy day in Wellington.
Yeah.
Hey, David, always good to have a chat, mate. Always appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Go well. Take care.
Cool. See you all.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Ta-ra.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.
All right, David Farrar. If anyone knows about politics, man, God, that guy can talk the head off a horse, can't he, when it comes to politics? So it's Men's Health Week. All week we've been doing interviews and exploring key topics that men don't discuss, things like mental health, lifestyle habits, sexual health. We can't provide medical advice. We've said that all week. And the opinions shared today are those of our guests. If you have personal health questions, please consult your doctor, pharmacist or professional. But joining us today is Dr Alistair Somerville, here to discuss men's sexual health, and he's with us now. Thanks for coming on. Nice to see you. Let's start with the basics. What are some of the most common sexual health concerns that men will face, particularly as they age and get older?
Yeah, cool. So I guess there's a few different things. Erectile dysfunction would probably stand head and shoulders above the others. Just everyone knows a bit about it, and it's a really important thing for us as doctors to think about and do a good job of for people. Some other conditions that men experience difficulty with, premature ejaculation. That can be a lifelong condition. It's to do with your neural wiring that you set up when you're a young fella. And so, we get guys in their middle age where they've just been battling along with that, and for some reason they want to come and talk about it at age 40 or 50. Probably Peyronie's disease is interesting as well, just some of the insides of the penis scarring and people getting sometimes significant curvatures of the penis. And then, I guess the other thing that we might talk about is libido, which is a real Pandora's box of stuff. Probably usually the last thing that is going on is your testosterone levels.
Yeah. So with erectile dysfunction, we all hear about these, and we all hear about what you've just mentioned there. Very few want to talk about it though openly, don't they? And so I suppose the first hurdle is getting them to sit down or whatever to talk about it with their mates or family or friends or someone like yourself, a clinician or a doctor, just someone to help them through it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know how to answer that one on a kind of normal bloke sort of level. I'm probably not going to have a beer with my friends and go,
guess what?
But I think, but actually, I think, funnily enough, I think, I don't know if it's just the guys who I see, but I think the archetype of that Kiwi bloke who doesn't talk about stuff is kind of a bit like the kakapo, not so many of them around anymore. Yeah. I think probably through what media does, what various health promotions do, I think probably most jokers have a bit of a chat or, see a bit of media about it. I don't know. I think it's always going to be a bit tricky it's very vulnerable, isn't it, to share sexual difficulties with other people in your life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm 51 and I've got a whole bunch of mates, close mates, and they might poke fun at each other about certain things, but no one's ever really opened up about anything serious at all when it comes to men's sexual health. To be honest, I mean, of all my close mates, I think no one really has. I mean, everyone gets a bit of stick for not doing this or that or whatever, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, so if you're 50 and there's 6 of you having a beer, one of you's got ED.
Yeah. 1 in 6.
At age 50.
What is it though? I mean, what drives ED? What is it? Erectile dysfunction. What is it, and what's behind it?
In terms of what is ED? We can keep it real simple. We don't need to get all medical. It's just not getting an erection that's satisfactory for satisfactory sexual activity.
Yep.
And so whether that's sort of some mild softening, and everyone would like it a bit firmer, or you'd like it a bit firmer, or whether it's not lasting as long as you're used to, or whether you've had prostate cancer surgery and just nothing works, So there's a whole spectrum there. So we don't need to,
Yeah, we get it. Yeah. Yeah. So why?
Why?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, there's probably, it sort of depends who you're talking about. So I'll sort of try and, I think the main thing that we should talk about is blood vessels not working as well as you get older, but also as a little bit of a barometer of your general health.
Yep.
Okay, and that would be our same decade as you, Duncan, a couple of years older. And that would be what I call the getting fat middle-aged man erectile dysfunction. Okay, and I think that will be where we most focus on today because it's pretty helpful. I see a bunch of young guys with erectile dysfunction, and a lot of those are kind of performance anxiety, issues, but more psychological. But that, of course, is at play throughout the ages, and also if you've got erectile dysfunction and it's pure physical, of course your head's going to go into overdrive if things aren't working.
Yes.
Okay, so that's always a factor. Then we've got a few kind of, I guess, a bit more weird and wonderful or a bit more medical, people always go, do I need my testosterone tested or my thyroid test? Look, that's only going to be a factor in about 5% of people with erectile dysfunction. And then there's nerve conditions like Parkinson's disease. There's prescribed medicines, right? And there's illicit medicines.
And so what you're saying is lose weight and get out and exercise, and it might affect. It might have a positive impact.
Well, so that's sort of I'll yes and no. Okay, so I guess just both if you're kind of stressed and anxious, and also if you're a guy whose arteries are slowing down. Yeah, of course that stuff's going to help your general health, and over time that's going to help how your blood vessels work.
Yeah. So what is it, why do you think, I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask you anyway. Why do you think there's still so much silence or embarrassment for men to confront sexual health and to talk about it?
Look, I think it just comes down to that vulnerability. I'm not probably going to share with you very sensitive stuff that I feel pretty terrible about.
Yeah, and that's right, isn't it?
I think that's.
That's the same as for most men. Really, it's a personal thing. It's a deeply personal thing. What are then for these guys if they're worried about something? What are the early signs or symptoms that they should look out for that there might be some sort of deeper health issue related to sexual function? What do they look for?
Cool. Well, look, I just don't overthink it. Is that just if things aren't working, then I hope that people could find a doctor or a health professional who will hear them.
Is it naturally just part of aging? Like I'm 51. Is this going to happen? And do we just have to look out for it and realise that we're not 20, we're not 30, we're older, we're becoming older, middle-aged men, and we're going to get older. Is this a part of aging?
Well, yes and no. Okay, so I guess that. How's that for an answer?
Yeah,
do you like that one?
I don't know.
I think so. Kind of, I guess that, and kind of, it's like a bit health in general. So we sort of, if you come and see me for a checkup and I check you out for skin cancer and ask you questions about bowel cancer, I check you for prostate cancer, we're risk managing. I can't prevent all of that stuff from happening. We can do some stuff that's going to mitigate the odds. So I think probably erectile dysfunction kind of. I think probably we think about the blood vessels just losing their reactivity. All day, every day, our blood vessels are opening and closing in response to our environment. We hop out of a hot shower, we're nice and pink because they're trying to lose heat. We're cold, we go white because the blood vessels are constricting. And I think part of the aging process is that the reactivity of the blood vessels slows down, but then the stuff that we do determines how fast they slow down. Yeah. So if I'm exercising regularly, if I haven't got too much processed food in my diet and I'm not accruing fat around my liver and my kidneys, if my glucose and my blood pressure and my cholesterol's okay, my arteries are probably going to slow down slower than a guy who's not doing that stuff. Yeah. Is that? No.
I get it. Yeah, no, I understand that.
Conversely, you'll have guys who've really looked after themselves really well, and they're just a bit unlucky, and their genetic lot is that their arteries slow down more than a guy who doesn't look after himself.
Yeah, genetics are crucial, right, in all this?
Part of it.
Yeah. If I came to you with some issues, what would for blokes wondering what a consultation would look like, so if they come along to you or whatever, what does that look like? Because a lot of the men will be nervous that all sorts of things are going to happen to them. They'll be prodded and pulled and pushed and everything. What should a man expect?
So what are we going to do? So we're just going to have a matter-of-fact conversation about what's going on. We're going to just kind of chew the fat and break the ice a wee bit, okay? Because we just got to set up a little bit of a comfortable environment where you get heard. And so setting the stage is important, but like what you guys do with me coming on for an interview, okay?
Yeah.
That's kind of crucial because it's a relational thing. You're going to share something that you're not feeling too flash about. Then what am I going to do? I'm going to treat this like any other medical problem. Okay, and I'm just going to very matter-of-factly ask you a set of questions that help me to kind of really actually understand a bit of what's going on. So I'll go, hey, Duncan, so stuff's not working, eh? You've come to see me about erectile dysfunction. Tell me a bit about what's going on. Okay, and I'll be interested in stuff like, the degree of erectile dysfunction and how long it's been going on for. So you might say, oh, look, it's just over the last few months, it's just become a bit harder to maintain an erection during sex, or we'll actually dial down and understand what's going on, and hopefully we'll do that in a comfortable way. And we're interested in, so there's a bunch of questions that will help me to understand a bit more what's going on. I'll be really interested in what your medical conditions and history are, what medicines you're on. I'll be interested in how much alcohol you drink, whether you smoke, whether you use cannabis. I'll be interested if you've tried some treatment before. I will be interested in your thoughts of what's going on, because you'll know your life story and you'll go, oh, well, I just separated from my wife and now I've got this new girlfriend and it doesn't seem, you've gone through a big load of stress. You'll have some ideas about.
Yeah. And things like smoking and stuff, right? All that lifestyle stuff, that affects it, right? That it has an impact.
So I guess if you smoke, your arteries are just not going to be as responsive as if they don't smoke.
Yeah.
But if you come with erectile dysfunction, sort of convincing you to reduce smoking is going to be part of the big picture of looking after your arteries ongoing. But I don't think that it would be unlikely that if a guy's got erectile dysfunction and he stops smoking, that immediately things are going to come right.
No,
it's sort of part of the background looking after work.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
I get that. No, I get that. Yeah, there's always a reason why we're at this point, because something's happened beforehand. What about partners and like girlfriends, wives, whatever? How can they, or whatever it is that you're married with and what you do? How can partners play a supportive role in men's sexual health? Should couples be having these conversations?
Look, I think that sounds it's usually a pretty good idea. And here's a trick, and I'm going to turn your question on its head. This affects partners and relationships as much as it affects the blokes. So I've got some studies, I do present talks on this, and I've got a load of scientific papers and stuff. And if you look at guys with erectile dysfunction and you look at their partners, and you get both the man and the partner to rate how big a problem the erectile dysfunction is and rate their sexual satisfaction or dissatisfaction, the partners actually rate it higher than the blokes with erectile dysfunction, and relationships do fail.
Yeah. And relationships do fail, don't they? They do fail because of this sort of thing.
Yep. And so kind of, I guess that, we'll talk about how partners can be supportive, but we'll also acknowledge that this has an impact on them as well.
Yep, totally.
So, look, how can they be supportive? And again, just turning it upside down, I get guys come in and they've been humiliated by partners. They've been made fun of. They've been told they're no good.
Yeah, it's the last thing they need.
And so these guys, like, seriously, it compounds the problem about 10 times, right?
Yeah. No, I get it.
So just go, this happens. It's a go get checked, and just quite like not a blaming, just a supportive. It's a thing, and go see the doctor.
Yeah, just embrace the fact that they're seeking help. Are there myths, or what are the myths and misconceptions, I suppose, around sexual health that you wish more people knew the truth about? Is there any?
Can I talk about the medication?
Yeah.
Because I think that's the biggest myth. We'll use the word sildenafil, which is the generic name for the medication, along with tadalafil.
Yep.
And people are a bit freaked out by them. They're made in a factory by a pharmaceutical company. Will I become dependent on them? Aren't they bad for your heart? And are they a chemical crutch? All they do is they open up the blood vessels. Okay, so what the machine is that you get turned on, and a signal goes down your spinal cord through your nerves to the little arteries sitting in the tubes in your penis. And says, hey, fellas, open up, and bada bing.
Yeah.
And all that these medicines do is they increase the response of the arteries to that signal. Sorry, if this is boring and technical.
No, because the impact of that is mental health too, surely, because they're back in the saddle and it's all working, and that's going to make them feel better.
The reason that these medicines started off as medicines for blood pressure and hearts, and they're still used for certain medical conditions. And then just dovetailing with what you're sort of saying, well, hey, if you're dealing with erectile dysfunction, the erectile dysfunction itself's not that bad, and it will actually tidy up with a bit of attention to looking after yourself, and also just if you get a bit of a boost in your confidence, you may be away.
Yeah.
You know,
I hear you. You're back. Hey, just finally, and final question, and you've been really clear, really simple. I get it, and thank you for that. What's the key message that you'd like blokes listening to this, if they are listening to this, to take away from this conversation we've had? What's the one thing you'd like them to remain with them?
Cool. Well, job number one, erectile dysfunction is really common. Okay, you're not a weird guy with a broken body.
Yeah.
Okay, you're just one of the crew. If you go and see a doctor because it shouldn't be horrible and scary, if it's horrible and scary, go and see another doctor.
Yep.
And it may be an opportunity to get your teeth into some important surrounding health issues, but there's also treatment that's available. So don't be embarrassed and shy. It is it's vulnerable stuff, but you should be received well, and there should be a positive outcome of going and seeing someone about it.
Good place to leave it. Alistair, I appreciate your time, mate. I appreciate your expertise and knowledge. Really well said.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
All the best.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.
Oh, yes, men's sexual health. It's always the curly one, isn't it, at times to discuss, but always appreciate Alistair's time on the program. So, I've got no letter to the editor today because I've just decided it's been far too busy. It's a Friday, and this is us. We're done. We've also had technical issues as well. We don't usually, you don't have to know these things. It doesn't really matter, but you wouldn't have heard from Isaac today because we've had a few issues with buttons and sounds and channels and pipes and all sorts of things. I don't know how it works at all, but it hasn't worked, so it doesn't really matter. You don't really need to know that, but I'm telling you anyway because we said we'd tell you when things happen. Thank you for your feedback and thank you for your support. Get in touch through our social media at Duncan Garner Podcast on TikTok, Instagram. Flick us an email at duncan@rover.nz. To my team, this is how a lot of husbands feel in marriages, and it's just silenced, aren't they? They're not allowed to speak. This is an example of it, right? To my team, thank you, Isaac. We'll do it again the next time we do it, I suppose. Remember, life's no dress rehearsal. There's no curtain raiser. This is it. We live in one of the best places on earth, so get out and enjoy it. Have a great rest of the day. Take care and look after yourselves. Ta-da.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.